First, the UN says Russia has indicated that it is ready to discuss opening safe corridors to the besieged rebel-held east of the Syrian city of Aleppo. Russian-backed Syrian government forces have retaken more than a third of eastern Aleppo since the last weekend, forcing thousands of people to leave. It can be incredibly difficult to speak directly with people inside Aleppo, but this programme has spoken to two men who have witnessed Syria's war from within. Here's what they had to say.
My name is Muhammad Ali Halabi. I'm an English teacher at Aleppo High Schools.
Ammar Al-Salamo, Aleppo Civil Defense Manager, Aleppo Western Countryside.
I'm living in the eastern part of Aleppo right now. I've been living here for about 6 years since the beginning of the Syrian Revolution.
Actually, no one can believe the situation inside Aleppo. No one can imagine what happened inside Aleppo because it's a madness.
I'm married with 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, and I'm quite afraid for my family.
Aircraft just chill and chill without stopping, and the artillery field chill at the same place. In Aleppo right now, 300,000 living in a complete depression, in a complete hell.
Every day you have dozens of people are dying. That's continuously, daily. I might die just now during while speaking to you.
Nothing to eat, nothing to drink.
No food, no fuel, no medicine.
Right now, no electricity. People just sleep in the darkness and wake up at the voice of the aircrafts, at the voice of the bomb, at the voice of missiles.
Bombing and targeting people and civilians are continuous, non-stop, and 24 hours. Recently, my house was targeted and collapsed to the ground, and we could escape. People pulled out from under the rubble, and that was a miracle that all of us survived.
Sometimes we find people want a car, want something to take their dead body, the dead sons, dead father, in order to be buried. Even vehicles are not available for those to bury their dead sons and dead father. Our work seems to be like a drop in the ocean. What can you do? What can you do for those people who starve? What can you do for those people who are under the rubble? Hundreds are under the rubble. Up to now, there are 30 people under the rubble. We couldn't do for them anything.
People who are being targeted or being wounded, we don't know where to get them, to bring them. No, just even the small medical centers were completely destroyed to the ground.
Where is the hospital? The hospital right now is the most dangerous place ever in Aleppo. That's if there is a hospital. After all the hospitals have been destroyed and crushed. Civilians start to move in large number towards the Kurdish area and the rebel area.
They are quite afraid of more advances towards those central areas. People who went to the regime areas were all arrested. They arrested all men between 18 and 42. They were directed to the intelligence stations and forces, and they are trapped. They are still trapped there, and they are going to be investigated one by one.
Some tens of families stay in their homes and they find themselves just in the hand of the regime.
Yeah, a lot of people would prefer to defend their own land, and they are ready to sacrifice their lives for the sake of their land, because they already know that when the regime are getting closer to their areas, they would execute a lot of people. The Russian government took this chance of some sort of political gap in America. You know, we have some movement of between Donald Trump, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, and they are trying hard to take this chance because there is some sort of political space, so to speak. So they are doing whatever they like without any international questioning or even lecturing. In the midst of utter international silence, no one is doing anything towards what's happening in Aleppo.
People believe that, especially here in Aleppo, believe that the crushing of Aleppo and the starving of the civilian and shilling the civilian with all internationally banned weapons, not only written. This scheme not only written or organized in Damascus or Tehran or Moscow, but also permitted by the Western country.
So the UN can do a lot for the people here, innocent people. They can make pressure on Russia to stop the continuous shelling and make a way out for people here, innocent people here, to go out. That's what we like nowadays.
This is a shame on the world because it is 2016 and people get burned to death and suffocated to death and starving to death. That's the situation in Aleppo.
Well, that was teacher Mohammed Al-Harbi and Ammar Al-Salmo, who's a civil defence manager, describing life in the Syrian city of Aleppo. We can speak now to Robert Mardini, who is in charge of the Red Cross's work in the Middle East, also Yasmin Nalawi, a Manchester-based Syrian community organiser, and the Labour MP Stephen Doughty, who is campaigning for aid drops into Aleppo. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Stephen Doughty, humanitarian corridors are being discussed. If they're opened up, would that be enough?
Well, obviously, the key thing is to get aid in, and by whatever means possible. But obviously, we haven't been able to see that. We've got hundreds of thousands of people at risk. The UN has warned of it becoming a graveyard. And if we can't get aid in through regular routes, we need to consider aid drops using British aircraft if necessary. And over 200 MPs have supported calls on the government across parties to do that as urgently as possible.
It's a risky business, though, isn't it?
It is a risky business. It's obviously not the first option, but we have seen where there's been that threat before. Corridors have been opened and thousands of people's lives are at risk at this very moment, and we need to use every means possible to get the aid to them.
Robert Mardini, your thoughts on the UN now discussing that Russian proposal for there to be humanitarian aid corridors. Do you hold out much hope?
Well, we need to keep hope, of course, and anything that will ease up the situation for people in Aleppo is welcome. For any movement of populations out of the eastern side of Aleppo, the besieged part, it should take place under safe and voluntary conditions. This is absolutely important. It means consent by all sides because it has to take place in safe conditions.
Would you support the idea of aid drops?
Well, any new idea is to be envisaged to breach the huge gap that exists today between the needs of the people and what is available. But we need to keep in mind that airdrops is for us the solution of last resort because it is logistically very challenging, it is very expensive, and if there is no consent by all sides, again, it will put civilian population at risk and be, at the end of the day, counterproductive. So it has to be, all those parameters have to be weighed very carefully.
Let's bring in Yasmin Nalawi. Yasmin, you work really looking forward in terms of what happens with Syria. Right now with Aleppo, what are your immediate concerns?
Well, let's just keep in mind that the party that we're relying on in terms of these negotiations for humanitarian access is Russia. And this is the same party that is bombing civilians day in and day out. So when we're relying on this country as the focal point of these negotiations, then do we have a lot of hope? Well, you must forgive Syrians for being skeptical of this. So I would echo what Stephen said earlier, which is what we need is an enforcement mechanism or a plan B if this falls apart, as we've seen it fall apart time and time again with Russia. We've been here before. We've been at the negotiating table before. We've had solutions and negotiations and solutions that have been agreed to by Russia and other countries. What has been missing is the enforcement. So what we need to say is if these humanitarian corridors fall through, or if Russia or Assad fail to adhere to the terms of the humanitarian corridors, then we need a plan B. We need a plan to conduct humanitarian aid drops, and we very much support the letter that was supported by over 200 MPs to the government for the UK to take this initiative on board.
Stephen Doughty, can the people of Aleppo keep on waiting while the international community looks at this issue?
Well, clearly not. There's over 200,000 people who are at risk, and 30,000 people have fled to the west of the city through unauthorised routes. All the hospitals are bombed. I mean, fundamentally, we need a peace settlement. We need a ceasefire, and that is becoming on Assad and on Russia, who've been barrel bombing the civilians there and conducting terrible operations. But we need to consider all the means at our disposal. We can't wait, and if necessary, we need to use that enforcement mechanism, that humanitarian airdrops, if necessary, using British forces to get that aid to the people who most need it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.